It's really a great opportunity to hear Panama Bartholomy, who's the executive director of the Building Decarbonization Coalition. It's a multi-sector forum advocating for and creating solutions to our pollution-intensive building stock. Panama previously was the European director of the Investor Confidence Project, where he worked to unlock capital markets for energy efficiency projects. He's also been an advisor on energy and the natural resources to California Assembly Speaker John Perez. He served as deputy director of the California Energy Commission's Efficiency and Renewables Department, and he worked for the California Conservation Corps on vocational education. And he's been on the City of Sacramento Planning Commission and the County Environmental Commission for County of Sacramento. A former board member of the U.S. Green Building Council and past president of its Northern California chapter, you can see that Panama has extensive experience working with people in government, industry, and other places on the issue of what to do about reducing carbon emissions from our buildings. We're delighted that he's joining us today from his home in Northern California by Zoom, and we'll have an opportunity to have questions with him later. So we're going to turn the program now over to Panama. Panama, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Debbie. And if I could just get the ability to share my screen, please, I'll switch over to my presentation. Well, first of all, I want to very much thank the organizing committee for the opportunity to speak with you all, and thank you all for sharing some of your late weekend afternoon with us on this topic. I want to thank Debbie, Susan, and Hillary for putting together this and managing both an in-person and online experience. It feels like the perfect representation about where we're at with coronavirus right now and the hoops we all have to jump through to keep ourselves safe and also but informed and educated about everything. So I really want to thank Pastor Dan for sharing the church with us. I wish I was there in person, and hopefully soon we will all be together again talking about solutions to the climate crisis. I was asked to come and talk about electricity and natural gas. I'm going to be followed by two fantastic speakers who are going to provide some of the practical details about how to electrify your house and more details on the technology. So I'm going to be mostly focusing on the why and then what is happening in politics and what's happening around us is how I'm going to be doing this. I'll talk for about 25 minutes and then have an opportunity for some questions and answers that hopefully will come from you all. Feel free to put your questions in the chat if you're online or hand out. I believe there's note cards being passed around in the church if you have any questions, and happy to get to the ones that I like and avoid the ones that are uncomfortable. All right, deal. I'll get started now. Just a couple slides of context, just to remind us about where we're at and what California is trying to do on climate change. Obviously, California bears a pretty disproportionate impact of climate change due to our topography, due to being right next to the ocean, due to our climate, being a Mediterranean climate and being very dry, and also with that those coastal winds coming in. I mean, forest fires, sea level rise, drought. I mean, extreme heat. I mean, we get it all with climate change, and so it's no shock that we should be a leader on trying to address climate change and trying to play our role in helping to avoid climate change. And so the slide in front of you is one that represents a bunch of work that was done under former Governor Jerry Brown. And the key things that I just want to point out is that he signed a piece of legislation that said by 2045, we will have completely carbon neutral or zero carbon electricity produced all over California. And then he signed an executive order, not a bill, but an executive order directing all of his agencies to also bring about an economy-wide zero carbon economy, carbon neutral economy, so that industry, buildings, cars, et cetera, would all be working towards carbon neutrality by 2045. And that is the type of leadership that we need, not only in California, but across the world, if we're going to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. He specifically chose those targets at that date because that's the role that California has to play and the pace that we need to meet in order to help avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change if everybody else does it along with us. And so in California, this is where our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. LDVs stand for light duty vehicles. So that's the second bar that you see there. But these are the major sectors where greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. This is million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. And you can see, buildings, cars, other transportation, manufacturing. This presentation is going to focus on this little orange piece. I already said that we're moving towards 100% carbon-free electricity, which is the blue piece of buildings, the buildings bar. Where we're not making as much progress on is that orange piece of the buildings bar, the greenhouse gas emissions that are coming from burning gas in our buildings. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And thank you so much for coming out to talk about it. So just a little bit of background on gas. I think one interesting thing for us out here in California is we don't produce a lot of the gas that we use here in the state. We import about 85% of it from the Midwest, from Canada, and from Texas. And it comes across increasingly in areas of increasing population growth. And so increasingly every year, as we see lots of population growth in New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada and Oregon, Idaho, et cetera, we're starting to have more and more competition for that natural gas as more and more homes are built with natural gas in those states. And so right now we're going through a global surge in prices for natural gas, and us not having control over this energy source that we have strongly committed ourselves to is going to create an energy independence problem in the very near future. And so we need to get a handle on the source of the energy that we use to power our homes, our businesses, our economies. Also, this is important because we have really strong laws in California around air quality, around water quality, around drilling for gas and oil, and what you do with the waste from that. The states and the provinces that we're getting our natural gas from don't share our same values or laws around the extraction or the impacts of extraction of natural gas. And so because we're such a heavy importer, we're actually exporting all of the pollution from this heavy energy source that we use to these other states where it comes from and the communities that live around that extraction. So some of the reasons why we're having an increased focus on natural gas. One is the energy independence issue. Two, we're starting to have a much better understanding about the impacts on air quality from burning gas in buildings. When you burn gas, you release nitrogen oxides, one of the most common pollutants and one of the most common air pollutants to cause respiratory damage and respiratory attacks. You also release carbon monoxide and you release formaldehyde. We've done a lot of work in California on air quality. We still have 5 of the 10 dirtiest air basins in the entire country, including the Bay Area being one of them. And so we've done a lot of work to try to address air quality. We've put all the best available control technologies that we can on power plants. We've continued to have more and more efficient cars so that we can get cars as efficient as possible, but we haven't done the same thing about our appliances in our buildings. And so when you look at our appliances in our buildings, our furnaces, our water heaters, our stoves, and our clothes dryers, combined, the appliances in our buildings that are burning gas are producing 5 to 6 times more air pollution than all of our power plants across California, and twice as much air pollution as all of the cars over car crazy California as well. And if we're going to start to really get the kind of air quality that we need to be able to support healthy lungs across California, we're going to have to come to terms with reducing pollution from buildings. But it's not just the pollution that escapes from the buildings. Perhaps some of the most dangerous pollutants at the most dangerous levels are burning gas from appliances and keeping that pollution indoors. And unfortunately, through a number of increasing studies, including from our own Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories, is starting to show the really high levels of pollutants that are in homes that have gas stoves and use gas stoves to cook foods. In 2014, Lawrence Berkeley National Labs did a big study of 60,000 homes in Southern California, and they modeled out that about half of those homes, all of them with gas stoves, half of those homes were exposing people to levels of nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, and formaldehyde that would be illegal if found outdoors. Dr. Brett Singer, the scientists behind the study said if we were seeing these levels outside, we'd be able to go and have a regulatory proceeding against the source of this pollution. But because it's in people's homes, there's nothing we can do about it. And so increasingly, there's a growing body of evidence that shows there's significant indoor air quality problems of cooking with gas, including a study out of Australia, a university in Australia, and this was a news article about that study, that compared the impacts on children's lungs of living in homes with gas stoves as living in a home with a cigarette smoker. And so we're increasingly starting to see now regulations about what we do about homes that have gas stoves that I'll talk about later on in the presentation. As Debbie mentioned, though, one of the most critical issues with natural gas is its greenhouse gas impact. Natural gas is basically methane. 92 to 98% of the natural gas that you may burn in your house is pure methane. The rest of it has some sort of additive or pollutant, depending on how it was extracted and the basin from which it was extracted. And the reason why methane is an issue is because, as Debbie said, it's a super pollutant. It's 84 times better at trapping heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. It doesn't last a long time. It's got a half-life of 25 years, but it's incredibly powerful. And scientists say that about 1/4 of all the climate change impacts we're having right now are just due to the methane emissions from the last 25 years. And so it's having a significant impact on us right now. And this is the reason that the International Panel on Climate Change, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is starting to take a new look at it. And earlier this year, they released their most recent report, getting ready for the next big global climate conversation. And they identified methane as one of the chief culprits in our climate fight, and one of the key areas that we need to focus on. And methane is a significant problem of natural gas. You think, okay, it's methane's a natural gas, but then we burn it. And as you said, it produces some pollutants, but as long as we burn it, it's no longer methane. Well, the problem is along the entire system of extraction, distribution, and use, we have an incredibly leaky system for methane. So before it even gets to your home and you burn it in your stove, it's already been releasing significant amounts of methane out into the atmosphere. And so this is a Washington Post story done in 2018 about a study that showed that the extraction and the use of hydraulic fracturing techniques, sometimes called fracking, in order to be able to extract natural gas across the country is actually an incredibly leaky way to get gas out, and is leading to significant leakage of methane into the atmosphere. And that leakage, and because it's such a powerful greenhouse gas, was actually offsetting any kind of climate benefit of using natural gas compared to, say, something like coal for producing electricity. We then need to ship it across transmission lines and distribution lines to get it to your building. And in many of our largest urban areas, we have some of the oldest pipeline systems in those areas. The map in front of you shows the average age of gas pipeline systems within those states. With the darker the state, the older the distribution system that you have there. You can see California, over 30% of our gas distribution system was put in before 1970. In fact, here in California, nearly 60% of all of our transmission and distribution lines for natural gas are over 50 years old and nearing the end of their useful life. And we're coming up on having to make a big decision about whether or not we put billions of dollars into replacing those systems in order to be able to get us gas into the future. And then lastly, out of a big study from the University of Michigan in 2019, showing that in particular in our largest cities, we have extreme amounts of methane release within our buildings, from bad pipe connections, from old pipes, from bad connections to appliances, and to appliances themselves. So much so that the researchers from the University of Michigan suggested that the leakage coming from appliances and pipes and buildings may be even worse than the leakage at the site of the hydraulic fracturing. And so this is all just to say that at every point, from the extraction to the transmission to the use of natural gas, we are leaking significant amounts of a super pollutant out before you even flip the switch to turn on your furnace or your gas stove. We have an incredibly dangerous pollutant being leaked into the atmosphere. And then once you burn it, one of the pollutants that comes out is carbon dioxide. And unfortunately, as we're winding down the use of coal and as we are trying to wind down the use of oil, we're increasing the use of natural gas. And now it's become one of the biggest drivers of emissions growth globally. And so we're going to have to come to terms with natural gas if we're to come to terms with climate. And so just to sum up, incredibly dangerous pollutants, one of the leading causes of air pollution in California, a significantly leaky system, and we have a big investment decision coming up on our natural gas system in California. And so the alternative really is this. This is a map that shows all the states that have adopted what are called renewable portfolio standards or renewable electricity standards, basically committing to the citizens to produce a certain amount, to sell a certain amount of renewable electricity to all ratepayers as a percentage of the overall electricity sold. California, as I said, we said by 2045, we're going to be completely carbon-free electricity being sold. And you can see all the other states that have made similar commitments. And so the alternative to natural gas is to take this increasingly clean electricity, either from your rooftop or from the grid, combine that with really efficient technologies to power your lifestyle instead, and to make your home completely pollution-free. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the technologies because Saman and Katie are going to talk about these technologies next. But let me just say that heat pumps are a decades-old technology that you can use to heat your water and to heat your space. These are incredibly efficient technologies, about 3 to 4 times more efficient than your best-in-class gas water heater or gas furnace. So this is incredibly efficient technology. Because basically what you're doing is you're using electricity to run a condenser and a fan rather than using gas and burning gas in your home to create the heat. You're simply transferring heat using a condenser and a refrigerant gas, very similar to your refrigerator. And Katie and Saman will go into that more next. But because of that, it's incredibly efficient. And it's so efficient that in every state in the United States, if you switch your water heating and space heating from a gas water heater and a gas furnace over to a heat pump, for each of those purposes, you'll get a greenhouse gas benefit. And the cleaner the grid that provides that electricity for those heat pumps, the more of a benefit you get. So this is a map that shows the average electricity grid mix. And you can see that West Virginia is incredibly light blue because it has a heavy coal grid mix. And so, but even in West Virginia, if you switch over your water heating, your space heating from gas over to electric and run those heat pumps off of West Virginia's dirty coal grid, it will still be a greenhouse gas benefit compared to running your water heating and space heating off of gas. And that's due to the intrinsic efficiency of heat pumps. And you look at California with a very clean grid. Most of you are probably calling in from PG&E territory. We have about 60 to 65% carbon-free grid when you combine all of the sources on it. And so you get a significant greenhouse gas benefit from switching off of gas over to heat pumps for water heating and space heating. But the technology that everybody wants to talk about, everybody says, oh yes, climate change, we've got to pull climate change. Like, whoa, I have to change my stove? Hang on a second. Maybe we don't solve climate change. And so the stove is where we find ourselves spending a ton of time talking. And I'm sure we've all had bad experiences with poor old coil-based stoves in the past. And what I would say is give it another chance. The stove technology that's coming out right now, whether it's smooth top, ceramic top, or induction, is absolutely amazing technology. And as I'll show you in a second, actually better than gas. You might say, well, that's an opinion. I'll say, well, I'm going to give you empirical proof that it is better than gas. So here's an induction stove. Some people call it the Tesla of your kitchen. For those of you that are less familiar with induction, you're about to become a lot more familiar with it. Shelley's going to give a demonstration, but basically uses electromagnetic fields to stimulate the molecules inside of a pan to get them hot and to be able to then heat up food. When you're cooking with gas, you're heating up the air around the pan or the pot that you're cooking in. And so you're having a significant amount of energy release. About 70% of the energy in a gas stove is lost in releasing to the air around you. That's why your kitchen gets hot when you're cooking with a gas stove. Not so with induction. It's about 90% efficient of the transfer of energy from the stove actually into the pan. So it's an incredibly efficient, incredibly safe and effective way to cook food. Now, I said that it's better than gas. And you might say, well, how can you say it's better than gas? What are the two things that people think they like better about gas stoves? They think they like power, and they think they like control better. They think, you know, gas is really powerful, and I hate electric stoves. It takes a long time for them to heat up. I turn on the gas stove and boom, it's heating up immediately. And then control. You know, I turn down an electric stove and it takes a long time to come down, whereas gas, I can immediately turn it down and it comes down. So the Food Service Technology Center out of San Ramon that does a lot of research on food did a big study 2 years ago, and they compared 3 induction ranges represented on the slide in front of you by the red lines on there, 2 resistance electric ranges represented by the green lines, and 1 top of the line master gas stove represented by the blue line. And what this chart shows is it shows the average time that it takes 12 pounds of water, about 4 children's worth of pasta water, to come to a boil, just about 200 degrees, a little under, and then how long it takes it to get it back below boiling point on these different stoves. And so it measures the 2 things that chefs and foodies are concerned about the most: power and control for their technologies. And so what you can see is that the 3 induction ranges were incredibly fast about getting this water to a boil, twice as fast as the all-electric models, and 3 times as fast, therefore 3 times as powerful as the best-in-class gas range. And then on control, one of the beauties of induction is when you turn it down, it immediately goes down. And so as you can see from this testing done by the Food Service Technology Center, it has about twice as good a control as your best-in-class gas stove. So when it comes to the 2 issues that foodies and chefs care about the most, power and control, induction blows the doors off of gas stoves. And it's one of the reasons why Consumer Reports loves induction cooking and electric cooking in general. When you look at the 2020, the top 8 ranges out of Consumer Reports, 6 of the top 8 ranges were electric, with 5 of them being induction, including the top 2 for a wide variety of different prices. And you can see the top gas units coming in about $2,725. And so when you look at, you know, this critical issue of cooking in the transition for homes off of gas, you have technologies coming out now that are safe, efficient, perform better for what you need, and are incredibly easy to clean. And so you might say, well, fine, but you know, this electrification, it must be very expensive. Well, the good news is that those rabid environmentalists at the California Building Industry Association, the trade association of home builders in California, did a big study in 2018, and they looked at the cost of electrifying homes in California. And what they looked at is for looking in particular at appliances and looking just at appliances. And the study found that electrical appliances that we're talking about, heat pumps, induction stoves, induction dryers, et cetera, have a similar or lower cost than natural gas appliances. What they didn't include in this study was the cost of the infrastructure of getting gas to the building. And that includes the lateral from the gas main in your street all the way out to your house, anywhere from $6,000 to $15,000 in California, plumbing to be able to get that gas to all the different appliances, and then the venting to be able to get the toxins that come out of burning that gas up into the Bay Area's air basin as quickly as possible. On the low end, it's about $7,000 per home in order to have gas in your building. The National Association of Home Builders puts out a study every year that looks at the impact of every $1,000 of increased costs on a new home, and what kind of families it prices out of the ability to be able to afford a home. And they say for every $1,000 in California in 2021, about 12,000 families are priced out of the ability to afford an average home in California. And so we're looking at about $7,000 just to put gas into homes. You're always going to put electricity into the home, but gas is an actual choice about whether you put it in. And when you look at the cost, it's a clear winner. The consultancy firm E3 looked at bill impacts of retrofitting homes up and down California, PG&E territory, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power territory, Southern California Edison territory. And when retrofitting water and space heating from gas over to heat pumps, In all of the different projects they looked at, you had a bill benefit, meaning you were paying less than what you were paying before. And for retrofits and on new construction, it was basically a wash. It was coming in about the same. We already build incredibly efficient homes in California, and we have really high electricity rates and really low gas rates. And so for new construction, it was coming in basically a wash. Now, every home is different. Every house is different. Every shower length is different. Everybody likes a different temperature. So, results will vary, but in general, from this major study looking at across the state, we found that there was a significant bill benefit for electrification. So just to sum up, electric buildings are going to be cheaper, healthier, more climate friendly, and safer. So I'll finish here with what's happening then. In 2019, Berkeley became the first city to ban natural gas in new buildings. First city, and not only in California, but in the United States. And it started a wave of other cities. 49 other cities in California have now adopted this. Denver, Seattle, cities over in Massachusetts, Vancouver, and we have a next wave coming up as New York City has proposed this as well. All of it started with a spark right in Berkeley, California. The fourth individual to testify that day in Berkeley at the city council meeting when they were considering adoption of this was Darren Klein. And he's a representative from Pacific Gas and Electric, and PG&E is the fourth largest distributor, the fourth largest seller of natural gas in the country. And Darren got up, he was the fourth person, and he said to the city council, we're here to support Berkeley and any other city in our territory to help us, PG&E, stop the expansion of our gas system. We recognize that an expanding gas system with fossil fuels does not have a role to play in California's decarbonized future, and we don't think our customers are going to be able to afford it out into the future. Since then, they have testified or sent letters of support to dozens of cities across their territory that are considering similar policies. And you folks in your territory, really along the peninsula and running down into Santa Clara County, have really led the state and therefore the country, therefore the world and the galaxy in adopting these policies to either ban or seriously hinder the expansion of gas within your communities. And that's given really that's given the push to the state to do something as well. And so the state just adopted a brand new statewide building code across the entirety of California that'll go into effect on January 1st, 2023. And this does not require all electric construction starting in January 1st, 2023. What it did though is it put significant incentives within the code to push towards all electric construction for low-rise residential and low-rise commercial buildings, basically making it very hard to build with natural gas after January 1st, 2023 for low-rise residential and low-rise commercial. And there was very clear messaging coming from the state that by 2025, we would be seeing the movement towards an all-electric code moving forward. But that's just new construction. New construction makes up less than 1% of our building stock every year. And the real issue is going to be looking at existing buildings and existing appliances. And the way that we get after existing appliances is the best way to address them is going to be when the old appliances break. Now, remember, we're trying to get to carbon neutrality by 2045 here in California. We basically have 25 years. Over that time, your water heater is likely to break 2 to 3 times, and your furnace will break 1 to 2 times. Hopefully it won't, because hopefully you'll replace those the next time they break with heat pumps. But those are the key intervention points that we're going to have to be able to get people to switch over to heat pumps for space heating, water heating, and induction cooking for their stoves. And so we're going to need to at first encourage and then really require people to be making the switch when this happens. And so I'm really happy that the Bay Area Air Quality Management District is considering taking a leadership position on this. In the first quarter of next year, they're going to be considering rules that will say by 2023, for furnaces and water heaters, you're going to have ultra low NOx water heaters. And this will encourage people to just go the full limit to heat pumps. And then by 2029, they're looking at saying zero NOx, basically heat pumps across the board for water heating and space heating after 2029. This is not set yet. And if you were to ask, what is the one most powerful thing that you can do to help the Bay Area, California, and the world on climate change and on buildings, it would be to press your local leaders that sit on the board of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District to go ahead and adopt these standards and make them more stringent than what you see on the screen. Diane Bailey from Menlo Spark is on this call, is one of the leading voices in this push, and she can help you identify who those leaders are and the most effective ways to get to them. And I'll end here just by saying that we need to do this the right way. If we don't do electrification right, it could exacerbate some of the economic inequalities that we already have within our society. As we see more and more communities start to refuse new gas, and as we start to get people to leave the gas system, we have a situation where these gas companies have already invested in this infrastructure in the ground. These are usually 60 to 80-year investments. They've already financed it, and then they've worked out with their regulator, getting that financing paid off by ratepayers, all of us paying rates on this. So if you have fixed costs and you have less ratepayers paying off those fixed costs, you necessarily have to raise the rates on those people who are still on the system. That will make electrification even more economically attractive to people, so more people will jump off of the gas system and defect from it, which will mean less ratepayers to pay off those fixed costs, which means higher rates, and you can see where this is going. The danger of this is really for people without the agency or the means to make different choices about their appliances. Renters in particular face a situation where usually landlords choose which appliances to put in when your appliance breaks, and they generally choose the cheapest appliance they can get away with. Or lower income households who may not be able to pay for some of the electrical infrastructure upgrades that you may need in order to put in some of these technologies. And so we need, as we begin this transition and as we move towards regulation, being very careful about certain classes within our communities to be able to help them make this transition. That's why it's very exciting to see communities like Menlo Park actually putting this front and center in their building decarbonization policies moving forward. And it's why we're very excited that California has opened up a proceeding at the Public Utilities Commission recognizing that we have to get off of gas. And they made it very clear. We are going to get off of gas in California, but we need to do it in a managed way. And that conversation is happening right now at agencies across the state, how we get off of this. And so, just in summary, we're not going to be able to clean up our air or meet our climate goals and continue to burn gas in buildings. It's just end of story. The good news is all electric buildings can be cheaper, safer, and better for the climate to build. Policy is moving us in the right direction, but we need all of you to push your state legislators and your local legislators even harder on this. And this is an easy win. Gas is fundamentally bad, it's easy to see, and we have an alternative that is actually cheaper and better and ready to go. It's one of the easiest arguments to make, and we need all of your help in making that argument to push policymakers to go the limit. So happy to talk to you more. This is our website, buildingdecarb.org. Thank you so much for having us. Look forward to the questions. I look forward to the other presentations and working with all of you to make sure we decarbonize and take the pollution out of California's buildings. Thank you all very much.
Great. Panama, do you want to start answering a couple of the questions from the, shall be clapping, from the Google Doc that have come in from the online group? And then Debbie, I assume you guys there also have some folks who have questions.
Yeah, go ahead with the ones online right now. We'll collect any in the room. Thank you.
Great. So one of the first questions was, why are all these towns going electric? Gas is more efficient than electrical. And so I hope that some of the information that I've shared with you shows that that's fundamentally untrue, that actually heat pump technology and induction technology, in the case of heat pumps, they're 3 to 4 times more efficient than your best-in-class gas appliance. And with induction ranges, as I said, your best-in-class gas range is about 30% efficient, and your average induction range is 90% efficient. And so just burning gas in your buildings is not efficient. Burning gas in a high-powered power plant, and then sending it to your home to run a heat pump, or creating renewable electricity and sending it to your home to run a heat pump, is many times more efficient than gas. And that's why we have 50 cities in California that have now made this jump. That's why we have state policy now pushing this as well. But thank you for the question. Another question, how is electricity being generated? Coal, natural gas, wind or solar aren't plentiful enough yet. Well, I would argue with the last one. We have a lot of wind, we have a lot of sun. It's pretty plentiful, particularly this time of year around California. I think what the questioner is asking is, we don't have enough systems to capture that wind and solar and to be able to turn it into electricity. So here in California, 45% of our electricity is produced by natural gas. We've done a bunch of work getting the older natural gas systems, power plants, out of our grid mix to reduce pollution, both air pollution and climate pollution. About 15% of our power comes from large hydroelectric dams. We're getting 30% of our power from renewable energy. And renewable energy is counted as wind, solar, geothermal, and then small hydro. Anything under 25 megawatts is hydro, and the rest is coming from our remaining nuclear power plant down in San Luis Obispo, Diablo Canyon. And so that's where California is getting its electricity from. We also import a certain amount, in particular in Southern California, they do import from other states. And in some cases like LA Department of Water and Power, some of that is coal electricity coming in from the Utah Four Corners region. Getting a lot of questions in the chat. Should I just keep on going?
Yes, please, keep going.
Okay. So it says, when my natural gas water heater wore out, I wanted to install a heat pump water heater, but the water heater is in a closet inside the house and doesn't have access to a large enough volume of air to meet the requirements of a heat pump water heater. So a heat pump water heater is basically like a tank of water, when you think of a tank water heater, and then it's got the heat pump sits on top of it. And it does require a certain amount of space around it to do the transfer of energy. So it'll be putting out cold air. And if you're trying to put it in a closet with a closed door, it won't be able to suck enough air in to make that transfer. And so in the case of the person asking the question, if you had it in a closet, you would need to get louvers on that door. So basically replacing that door. I think, it's always a bummer when you got to buy a new door when you buy a new water heater, but if it helps to avert catastrophic climate change, maybe it's an investment that could be made in order to be able to implement that water heater, or you may need to consider putting it in another part of the house.
More questions in the Google Doc as well. Or do you have a question there in the room, Susan?
Yes, I've got two questions, three actually. First one is, what is the useful life of induction cooktops and heat pumps?
Yeah, it's about 25 years for an induction stove, depends on use. And that's about the same as a gas stove. I mean, I think you can nurse along a gas stove, just like you can nurse along an induction stove. Basically with an induction range, what happens is generally all the electronics are in the top 4 inches of the range itself and behind the oven. And so if you need to replace any of the electronics, you basically pick up the top 4 inches of the range and do any kind of replacements of hobs underneath that, similar to your gas stove, where usually most of the leaks that come from gas stoves are either at the actual burner itself or the few inches away from the burner, a pipe away from the burner, and making those fixes there. So that's generally the 2 areas where you would need to fix it. And it's about 12 to 15 years for a heat pump water heater, and about 15 years for a heat pump space conditioning. And those are exactly the same as gas water heaters and gas furnaces as well.
Okay. Another question, how bad or what % of our problem is leakage at each of the home building gas lines? Is there a way to address that?
There, it's unfortunately it's expensive. When we moved into our house in 2017, the second night we were there, we definitely smelled gas. And so we called up PG&E, and PG&E said, get out of your house immediately. It's like, well, that's not really realistic. We had a little kid, we had nowhere to go, so we weren't going to be getting out of the house. They came and they said, yeah, there's a leak. And it's the same place that it happens in houses all over Northern California. It's right where the gas line comes into the home. There's usually condensation there, and eventually it wears down the line, and there causes a leak. And so you're going to have to spend a few $1,000s to replace that. And so basically what you can do is, I would never recommend lying to PG&E, but if you're concerned about leaks for your house, what I would say is go to PG&E and say you smell a leak, and you get them out there, and they bring out an amazing electronic nose, and they can smell all around your property and your house to see if there is a leak. And then you spend thousands of dollars to fix those little pinpoint leaks with a brand new pipe. Or you don't, and you just replace your gas appliances with electric appliances, and you avoid the whole thing completely.
Well, the third question I'm actually going to save because I'm going to answer it later. It has to do with where to go if you want guidance for making the switch. We're going to talk about a program. So we have time for one more question before we move on to our next presentation.
Sure, and it's one that I get a bunch, and you're hearing about it a lot, but you're hearing about biogas or hydrogen a lot. And we've already invested in all these pipes. And why don't we just keep on using these pipes and just put biogas? You take manure all over the Central Valley, and you capture the gas and you put it into those pipes, or you take hydrogen and you put it into those pipes, and then we burn the hydrogen instead. And so the challenge with that is really its availability and its cost. If we took all of the biogas opportunities across California, and then we took California's population share of biogas opportunities from the rest of the country and brought it in, and didn't use it on anything else. So didn't use any more in any of our transportation or our fleets that we're using it now, and just use it in our buildings, it could provide at best about 15% of the natural gas demand in buildings right now. And so you're going to have to make up that other 85% with something else, likely some electrification, but much more likely natural gas. And so relying on biogas for our gas system ties us to a future of relying upon methane, around fossil gas for our gas system. Hydrogen is even more complicated. Hydrogen is an incredibly small molecule. It's incredibly hard. You need to spend a lot of time and energy in order to keep it contained. And we did not build out a natural gas distribution and transmission system for hydrogen molecules. Anything over a 15% blend of hydrogen starts to cause embrittlement of natural gas pipelines and need for replacement. And so if we're going to be putting in hydrogen into our gas system, we're going to need a wholesale replacement of our gas system. For transmission lines, that's $4 to $6 million per mile. For distribution lines, that's $4 to $8 million per mile. And I would much rather be investing that in the electricity system, which we need for every other part of our economy, rather than in the natural gas system that's going to be reliant upon fossil methane out into the future. And so the cost, though, of biogas and hydrogen, right now, biogas is about 3 times more costly than natural gas, methane natural gas. And as we get to higher and higher proportions of it, it gets up to 20 to 30 times more expensive. And you can't even look at green hydrogen on the same chart. The costs of that are so high that they're so far out into the future. And so the key thing with biogas and hydrogen are, these are precious resources, and we should be using them, but we should be using them in the most precious way. We can easily electrify our buildings. We can't as easily electrify certain large industries, freight, aviation, airplanes, et cetera. Those are the places we should be using biogas and green hydrogen, rather than burning it in my water heater so I can take showers at my home. So thank you all very much. Look forward to working with you all on solving California's climate challenges, and look forward to the rest of the presentations.
Thank you so much.